Brr, brr, brr. A man has fallen into the river at Lego City. Hey, please, ready the rescue helicopter. Hello, I'm back. I know it's been a little while since I did a video on here. I've been really busy, and that's no lie. I'm actually preparing for my first performance later this week, hence why there's Harley Quinn jackets over there. It has to do with the performance, so don't worry too much about that. One thing I wanted to do this year, most importantly, I would say, is try to read more. And so far, I've been doing pretty well on that goal. My goal for the month of January was to at least read 3 books. And I have 3 books to talk to you guys about here today. There really was no particular reason why I read these books in the order that I read them. I just felt like reading them. The first one that we have here, one thing I want to do this year is I want to go into a pattern of reading a fiction book and then a nonfiction book, because I do tend to like nonfiction more than fiction. So the first title that I have here is a fiction title, and that is Ghoster by Jason Arnott. They usually always say never judge a book by its cover. The cover is actually what got me to read this, because it's just, as you can see, it's 3 texts. Scott, what is going on? Please talk to me. Just tell me that you're okay. And then I did something as I was in my library that I never do. I actually read the synopsis on the back. I usually don't do that because I want to be kept surprised. I never do that like with a movie that I have. If I've never seen the movie, I don't read the synopsis on the back. I kind of want to be surprised when I go in. We have Kate Collins has been ghosted. She was supposed to be moving in with her new boyfriend, Scott, but all she finds after relocating is an empty apartment. Scott has vanished, his possessions have all disappeared, except for his cell phone. Kate knows she shouldn't hack into Scott's phone. She shouldn't look at his Tinder profile, his call history, his social media accounts, but she can't quite help herself. That's when the trouble starts. Strange whispering phone calls from numbers she doesn't recognize, scratch marks on the walls that she can't explain, and the growing feeling that she's being watched. I was like, okay, this sounds pretty interesting, and this is different than the type of stuff that I normally read, which also made me want to read it. It was something outside of my comfort reading zone. This was an okay, decent read for the most part. It's very entertaining. It definitely kept me reading all the way through. It is kind of a lengthy book. It is 446 pages. So the basic story is you have Kate Collins. She is a paramedic, and she meets this guy named Scott, and she right, that was his name, Scott, right? Yeah, it's been a few weeks since I read it. She meets this guy named Scott off of Tinder, and they really hit it up. Of course, Scott is, at face value, he's not what he seems. He definitely keeps a lot of secrets. There are a lot of questions that Kate has that he's not answering for whatever reason. But she just shrugs that off because she goes, well, we've only known each other for a few months, so maybe at a certain point in time it'll come out. She eventually decides to move in with him. They decide to move in together, and that's when the weirdness starts, because she goes to the apartment that they're supposed to be moving into together, and he's not there. Everything that they're supposed to have is gone. All the furniture, all the, the TV, the couches, the beds, there's one bed that remains, and it's in Scott's room. So she's very confused, and at first she's heartbroken because she thinks, I've been ghosted. And for those of you who don't know what ghosted means, that means you're dating someone and then all of a sudden they just stop talking to you, stop communicating with you. That's where the title Ghoster comes into play. For whatever reason, though, his cell phone has been left behind, and she decides to basically hack in, jailbreak the phone, and read all of his personal stuff and his diaries and his profiles and all that. I will stop describing the plot right about there, because a lot of the mystery and a lot of the big plot points rely in what she finds on the phone. For the most part, the book wasn't too bad. It, like I said, it definitely kept me on the hook. It definitely kept me entertained. I was never bored while reading it. I ultimately give this book a 3 out of 5. That's a mild thumbs up from me. The big reasons why I didn't feel 100% satisfied after I finished reading the book was, number one, I thought the ending was a little too rushed and a little too out there, considering that for the most part, the book has kept this sort of grounded, in reality feel. The ending, like the last 7 to 10 chapters, sort of come out of left field. It sort of builds up to like a supernatural feeling throughout the book, but when it comes, it kind of hits like a brick, and it doesn't really gel with the rest of the story. I also thought the ending was kind of a too cute, too on the nose comment on like how we as a society are are too addicted to technology, most importantly our phones. And I was like, okay, I kind of get what the author was trying to do here. Doesn't work for me because I've heard it about 1,000,000 times, but I can kind of see where he's coming from here. I also thought the prose, the dialogue in the book was a little too inconsistent, a little too rough. The book is told from Kate's first-person perspective, so you do get a first-person narrative throughout the whole book. And a lot of the times, the dialogue comes off as if it was written by E.L. James, who authored the 50 Shades. Well, I used to say trilogy, but now apparently there's 5 books in it. Just 2 of them are told from Christian's point of view, as if that reveals any layers that were somehow missing. So as I was reading that, I kind of felt shades, no pun intended, of E.L. James come through, and I'm like, I don't know. But then anytime I felt that, the book would kind of bounce back and go right back on track. Like I said, 3 out of 5. That's a thumbs up for me. It's not a terrible book. It's also nothing special, though. So if this is something that you've been on the fence about reading, give it a shot. I don't think you'll be disappointed. From the reviews that I've been seeing online, it definitely gets mixed to positive reviews. So if this is something that you have been thinking about reading or thinking about checking out, I would say definitely give it a shot. It's worth it. Like I said, it's about 447 pages, and there are 77 chapters in there. It also is pretty mouthy, pretty profane. There's 245 F-bombs in this book. That's just a thing of mine. I personally count that. So, yeah, if profanity is not your thing, I don't know. But it doesn't really deter from the story. So that's Ghoster. I also do like how the critical quotes back here are told in iMessage bubbles. So yeah, there we go. So since that was a fiction title, I decided to obviously read a non-fiction title next, and that was Cam Girl by Issa Mazet. At least I hope I'm pronouncing that right. That's what she looks like. This is obviously a very explicit and more adult nonfiction title. I did not know who Issa Mazet was before reading the book, but I can definitely say that after reading the book, I am very much glad to have been introduced to her. Cam Girl is a memoir about Issa Mazet. It details about how, her upbringing in life and how she was never shy to be this person who was never afraid to get what they wanted by any means necessary. It talks about how, like, when she was 8 years old, she was leading a protest at her elementary school because she wanted a cow as one of the options for the school mascot. And she was, even though she got in trouble for it, she was happy that she led this rebellion. It then escalates into how in middle school she got this sort of existential awakening about, I'm a woman, I'm a girl, I can, I didn't realize that I had this, these unspoken powers over people just because I'm a woman. She details about how she likes control and how she manipulates boys into liking her, like with very subtle techniques. Like she'll flirt with them through eye gazes or with certain facial expressions. That also escalates into her wanting to do camming. And what camming is, it's basically a profession in the adult film industry where you perform various activities, if you will, from your webcam, basically in your room. You don't have to leave the house for it. You don't even really have to do anything explicit to get any money or donation. That's an interesting thing that I found out about this. You could literally just be sitting in your room talking about the weather, and people will tip you for it, which is pretty interesting. And this book details her whole career as this cam girl who was very successful in her career, and it details her experiences, both positive and negative. It mostly is negative experiences, though, about this profession, and it literally covers everything from A to Z about what to expect, the type of clientele that you'll be getting if this is a line of work that you so desire to go into, the currency, the logistics, the methods, everything you would want to know about this. Up until the last chapter of the book, I was going to give this a 4.5 out of 5. And then I finished the book and it upgraded to a full 5 out of 5. So this would be my first 5 out of 5 of the year. This is an absolutely fantastic book. Issa Mazet is a very charismatic author, and you can tell that from just by reading anything on here. She's very funny at times. She is also very blunt and very, this is how it is. She's a realist, I would say. She's very anxious. She is a ball of anxious realism, but she is a realist. There is a trigger warning at the beginning of the book. It talks about alcoholism, mental illness, suicide, self-harm, and sexual violence. This girl had a really rough life growing up. If you follow her on social media, though, I follow her on Instagram after reading this. She seems like a very, very, very carefree, very free-spirited girl. She's very fun. I think that authoring this book and detailing her experiences helped her to become more happy, more carefree. It's very therapeutic. You can tell from reading it that it is a very therapeutic read. Even though I did give this a 5 out of 5, it is really explicit. So for those of you who aren't into this type of topic or material, definitely skip this one. Those who are curious and want something new to read, this is definitely a fantastic book, one that I would highly recommend. For those of you who are avid Netflix watchers, I just recently got Netflix, so I haven't seen this movie yet. She wrote the screenplay for Cam, which was a movie that came out 2 years ago. I think it was a Blumhouse movie that they did for, or Blumhouse, however you pronounce it, that they did for Netflix, but I haven't watched it yet. But yes, it's I'm assuming it's a good movie because I've heard good things about it. But as far as Cam Girl, the book goes, it's a wonderful, wonderful book. I highly, highly recommend it. And the last book I have to talk to you guys about this week, it's unfortunately ending on a sort of a down note, and that is a fiction title by Lorenzo Carcaterra called Tin Badges. I wanted to read this because from that title alone, I'm like, it's a cop story. I like cop stories. My favorite genre of movies are action movies, but my favorite genre overall, subgenre, whatever have it, buddy cop movies. One of my favorite movies of all time is The Last Boy Scout. I actually have, I know you can't see it, but on the shelf next to me, on the top of it, I have the Laserdisc, the DVD release, and 2 VHS copies of it. I have it on Blu-ray too, but it comes in like a triple feature set. So I like watching those movies. I also like reading those books. And I was hoping that this would be like a really good new kind of story that I could get into. It's not what this is, though, unfortunately. The book is about this detective. His name is Tank Rizzo. Tank is his nickname. He and his partner Pearl retire after sort of an awry, job gone wrong a couple years prior. But they didn't retire dishonorably, if that makes any sense. They received pensions and all that. They become what is now known as tin badges. And what that means is that while you're still technically retired, you take on work from the police department, basically cold case files that they don't really know what to do with, so they hand them off to these quote-unquote tin badges so they can solve them. And they get this cold case, I say cold case because it really is just a generic sort of cop case, about these women who were assaulted and beaten in this apartment, and they basically go from there. First of all, this book has a lot of mediocrity to it. That's the main word that I can think about with this book. I gave it a 2.5 out of 5, which is a thumbs down. I didn't really care for this book after I finished reading it. I mean, it's entertaining. It definitely kept me entertained, but overall, I didn't really have any desire to go back and reread it as soon as it was over. Like, as soon as it was over, I was like, well, I'm kind of glad that it's over. It says on the back here from one of the critical quotes on the back here, it's from Alistair Burke. He writes, or she writes, I don't know, Lorenzo Carcaterra knows gritty storytelling. If you consider this gritty, you don't read very much. This is about as gritty as a dog taking a steaming dump on the sidewalk. It's not very gritty. If you want an author who's really like rough and gritty, I'd recommend Don Winslow. Don Winslow has written books, Savages, The Power of the Dog. I would say his most gritty books are the Power of the Dog trilogy, The Power of the Dog, The Cartel, and The Border. I haven't read The Border yet, though. I really want to read that, though. He also did stuff like The Force and all that. That's what I would consider gritty storytelling, because it's very rough, it's very chaotic, it's very all over the place, but it's very, very good. This is not gritty. This is basically an episode of NCIS. First of all, he finds out very quickly that a drug dealer with high connections in the police department carried out this crime, And the reason why he didn't necessarily, why it's considered a cold case is because I guess the police department didn't want it getting out that they have a dirty uniform. There's also a side plot where Tank's brother and sister-in-law get killed in a car accident, and and he actually ends up sort of pseudo-adopting his nephew because of it. And his nephew is apparently like this big genius, this boy wonder that these cops look up to, because he's like, oh, we watch all the crime movies, and I'm in like this forum where me and a few of these other kids get together and we solve like these cold cases that were left abandoned by the police department. And I'm like, this is the first time I'm hearing of a 15-year-old doing this, let alone a group of 15-year-olds doing this. But if that's your niche, go for it, I suppose. I don't know. It was a little too hard for me to believe. But like I said, everybody has got their niche, so I can't really deter from it too much. There's also a side plot involving Tank and the deaths of his family. In so much as the fact that Chris, the nephew, thinks that the car accident wasn't an accident, it was a murder. They touch on that briefly in the first half of the book, and then it's thrown out the window until like the last two chapters. And then, as like a final twist of the knife, there's also this subplot where Tank and his now dead brother weren't really all that close before the brother passed away. That's because, something happened, and he doesn't really feel comfortable in talking about it yet. So I'm like, okay, well, something bad must have happened. And I'm reading this book, and I'm like, I'm kind of waiting for this event to come out. I thought it would come out like halfway through the book, like it does in all of the movies that have this, like, oh, we don't really talk about what happened XYZ or all that. They save it for the last line of the last chapter in an attempt to sequel bait in hopes that readers will want to see a follow-up to this. I do not want to see a follow-up to this at all. Even though I didn't hate the book, I didn't like it either. So it's not something that I think I would need a sequel to. Maybe if you had another chapter just sort of explaining what that event was and how it led up to, maybe that could have helped. It was just there are also some jokes in this book that don't really work. They're not like cringeworthy and everything. It's like, they were just, I was reading it and I recognized that they were supposed to be jokes. They just weren't funny. There are also some intimidation scenes in the book where it's like, oh, he's trying to be tough and he's trying to impose himself onto these people. But whether it's Tank Rizzo, by the way, I don't know what kind of name that's supposed to be, our main hero of the story, or it's Gonzo, the drug dealer, which I know everybody else does this. When you're reading a book, you're playing a movie of it in your head, and every time I saw the name Gonzo, I just thought of the great Gonzo from The Muppets. And I was like, I kept waiting. I'm like, is he going to shoot himself out of a cannon? I'm waiting for, knowing how the story is going, I don't doubt it. But anytime there's like an intimidation scene, like where it's like, you and your buddies are going to do this and you're going to do that. And anytime that any one of these characters are supposed to come off as threatening, I'm like, I'm shaking in my boots. Like, I don't know what you want me to feel or any of that. Like I said, I don't think I'm the primary audience for this particular cop story. It seems like older audiences, mainly like people 60 and up, would take to this story more so than someone like me who's only 21. So yeah, I don't necessarily recommend that story. It could have been done a lot better, and it should have been done a lot better. So that's it. That's what I read for the month of January for 2020. Again, just to recap, we have Jason Arnopp's Ghoster. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. This one wasn't too bad. Issa Mize's Cam Girl, I gave this one a full 5 out of 5. This is absolutely fantastic. This is also one of my new favorites. This is just a tremendous book. And finally, Lorenzo Carcaterra's Tin Badges. I gave this a 2.5 out of 5. I didn't care for it, and I don't recommend it. So that is it for what I read. I was inspired to do this kind of video from Paperback Dreams, who is just a wonderful booktuber. She's also really nice, so that's a good thing. When you talk to other YouTubers, you hope they're as nice as they appear. She definitely is way nicer than she appears on her videos, and that's a good thing. That's a really good thing, because she's already nice to begin with. I don't have any necessary planned out books that I'm going to be reading for the month of February. There are some that I have in mind, but I don't know what necessarily is going to be my next read. So yes, comment down below. Let me know if you think this is a good video idea to be doing, a good series. Also, let me know what books, if any, that you read during the last month. If you have any book recommendations for me, I would highly appreciate it. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all whenever I decide to pop on camera next.